Okay, with that, here's Rosie.
Thanks, Debbie. Thank you all. Better put that in there before I lose it. I love being here. I'm so pleased that I was invited, and I'm actually filling in for a clinician that has left our agency, who is really our mental health person. But we are getting at FAU Card deeper and deeper into mental health and the implications of that with children and adults on the autism spectrum. So I'm going to talk a lot about that today. This presentation is usually a 2-hour presentation, so I have slimmed it down quite a bit. If you have questions, you can interrupt me, because I don't know if we'll have question time at the end. So let's launch. Briefly, FAU Card is a discretionary project that is funded by the Florida legislature. We assist families on their autism journey. We provide trainings to the community and professionals. I do a lot of work in the schools. If children are having some difficulties and they have autism and the teacher's like, I need some fresh eyes, we can come in, do some technical assistance, develop a report, making recommendations on evidence-based interventions, and help the teacher implement that. So we're really here to get the best outcomes possible. We are completely free to anybody who accesses us, so that is very unique to Florida, so we're feeling really fortunate about that. So DSM-5 is how we diagnose autism, right? They're the ones that came up with the criteria. So I'm going to review that really quickly, and then I'm going to talk about what autism really looks like in someone's brain who has autism. So they have to have deficits in social emotional reciprocity, the inability to kind of have a nice constructive back and forth conversation where every time a topic changes, they can stay on topic, conversation like we all partake in regularly. Deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors. I'm going to talk a lot about that. Deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. Relationships and human connectedness is extremely complex. And so it is the predominant feature for people with autism. They have to have at least 2 of these stereotypical behaviors or repetitive movements. They like sameness. They don't like change. They can be very resistant to that. They can become highly fixated on things. Again, difficulty transitioning. And they may have some unusual sensory things. The new DSM-5, we no longer call Asperger's anymore. They're level 1s, and it's based on their level of need and how we gauge their level of autism. So the CDC estimates that now it's 1 in 59 children have autism in the United States. It's 4 times more common in boys than girls. But let's talk about girls, because there's a lot of really great new research coming out that we're finding that girls are being identified far later. And some of the factors that contribute to that is for boys, we see 5-to-1 ratio. About half of the boys that have autism do have some degree of intellectual disability. But for girls, we're seeing for us to identify them, they must have much more significant symptoms. And we're only identifying about 10 in 1. So we know that something's going on, and why is that? So when it comes to social communication, what we're learning is that girls tend to be a little bit better observers. So they can mirror their successful popular peers. So instead of not turning, like boys would think, I'm in the group, even though my back is to the group, girls are having enough savvy to at least turn themselves to the group, which is what we all do naturally to engage somebody. So it's harder to spot. Some of their special interests that we know are very popular, that we see a lot with children with autism, girls' interests tend to be more girly. So they might love Barbie dolls. They might love dressing up like princesses or Disney princesses, and they can be very obsessive about it, but it's very easy to dismiss because, well, it's a girl thing, So we're missing girls that way as well. We're finding that girls, and I find this with many of our high-functioning boys, especially around middle school, is they hold it together all day long, and when they get home, they lose it. And we find that we put families in these positions of having to convince educators that something is really going on with their kid because they're quiet, they're compliant, they may do their work during the day, and so it's not showing up in school because they tend to be able to keep it together. We also see that the difference between girls is they internalize a lot of their emotions. So what we're seeing is more eating disorders, we're seeing cutting with them instead of the aggressiveness that we often associate with boys. So I know that there's a number of mental health professionals here. Really one of our goals at FAU CARD is to help you all build your capacity to serve these kids. It's something I'm very passionate about because when I talk about what the autistic brain is, you'll see very quickly that traditional therapy is not effective with our children on the spectrum. So we have to agree that receptive and expressive language abilities does not equal communication abilities. I am a speech-language pathologist, is my background, and I can tell you that for high-functioning kids that have decent language, I can do a standard language test on them, and there won't be any deficit. They may not even qualify for language services in the schools. But what I'm looking at is the social interaction. Are they able to talk about a variety of things? Are they able to pick up some of the subtleties of language and go with it and build off of it? And what I find when I talk, especially with teachers who have kids with really annoying behavior sometimes, is what they don't understand is our social sense is something we are all hardwired for from birth. Nobody had to teach us how to get along with others. Nobody had to teach us how to interact and bond with our parents. No one had to teach us how to be imaginative when we're toddlers and we're playing. That we're hardwired. So when you have a teacher or a parent who is telling their child for the 1,000th time not to do something, it can be very, very frustrating because they're not hardwired for it, and it came very easy to that parent or educator. So the cognitive behavioral intervention is the best evidence-based intervention therapeutically for children with autism spectrum disorders, especially moderate to high-functioning kids. You have to have enough language to be able to talk about language. So these are going to be for high-level kids. It teaches us about the thinking process. So it helps us to self-regulate. It helps us to be less impulsive. It helps us to understand how what we do affects other people. And they also teach how their behaviors affect others. This is straight cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the kind you use for a variety of disorders. So I'm going to keep going. So when I talk about autism, I talk about what is the brain processing. I don't like to talk characteristics because every child with autism is very different, and they are going to have different aspects and different degrees of things. But I want to know what's going on in their brain. What makes them different? And what we've found is that there are 3 primary neurologic processes that we see deficits in. And this should be helpful for you not only therapeutically but also academically. There are different ways to teach kids so that they can process information more efficiently and effectively. So there are 3 areas: central coherence, executive functioning, and theory of mind. I'm going to talk about each of those. Central coherence. When I think about central coherence, it's my ability to take in the world, the big picture of the world, and figure out what's going on. And how do I do that? I put things in categories, I pull from prior knowledge, so that every time I'm learning something, I'm not learning it for the first time. I'm building off information that I already have. So if you go into the grocery store and you see something in the produce section that you have no idea what it is, your central coherence kicks in, right? So you're going to pick it up. You're going to start associating it with things immediately. it's about the size of an avocado. It's got the color of maybe a mango. You might take it home so that you can taste it. You're going to definitely Google it. You may ask the produce guy. I mean, you're searching for information to build your bank about this particular item. It's also our ability to set a long-term goal and then break that goal down into steps that are achievable. It's what we all do. Whether it's a short-term goal or a long-term goal, we don't go from A to Z and say it's accomplished. We have to break it down. So children with learning disabilities have deficits in central coherence. That doesn't necessarily mean they're autistic, but this is something that we see. They have a conceptual learning disability. They have difficulty effectively communicating, summarizing information, recognizing expectations, and written expression. And I'll go into more detail about these things. Executive functioning, I think of as the air traffic controller of my brain. It's always on. It's always running. I'm engaged and I'm talking to you all, but if someone moves past me in my peripheral vision, I'll see it, but it's not going to distract me because I have good executive functioning. So I'm able to stay on task and I'm able to complete things. I'm able to self-regulate so that hopefully nothing throws me too much during this lecture to make me get off task. Executive functioning is also my ability to do long-term goal setting and break it down, but the important part is if I deviate from my goal, executive functioning tells you, oops, you're off track. Now you need to problem solve how to get yourself back on track. It's things like time management. If I were to give you all a 30-question quiz and you had 30 minutes to do it, around minute 14 to 17, you're going to look up at the clock and say, am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Do I have time to check my answers? This is your executive functioning telling you to check in. It affects when lower level things, attention, motivation, and emotional regulation. So think of your toddler who gets frustrated because they don't have enough communication to tell you what they want, or they figure out this is the goal I want to do, but somewhere along the way they get off track and they don't know how to fix it. That's because their executive functioning hasn't developed yet wholly. And emotional regulation. It's your ability as people who have within normal limits executive functioning to talk yourself down when you're aggravated, you know, to not do things that are impulsively that may have repercussions that you don't want to have to deal with. So that's nice. Higher level skills has to do with planning and organizing, again, monitoring where you are on a task, reasoning, problem solving, and flexibility. We would not be able to complete college without good executive functioning skills. I mean, think about it. In high school, if you're wandering around the halls, someone's going to say, where are you supposed to be? But in college, no one's even going to notice you. So getting to places on time, keeping things organized, making sure you do your assignments and turn them in, which seems to be a stumbling block for a lot of our high-functioning kids, is how we achieve, and certainly skills that are absolutely imperative when it comes to higher education. So oftentimes kids with executive functioning skills are described as being weak organizers. They have really messy desks, really messy binders. It's hard for them to find things. Like I said, they do their homework but forget to turn it in. They may be really good readers, but their comprehension might be spotty. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit about anxiety, and this could be one of the reasons for that as well. Abstract reasoning. They know that the Liberty Bell is, a relic from American history, but they may not get the symbolism of it being a symbol for freedom for our country. This initiation of language, as a speech pathologist, always just floors me. They have such a hard time starting conversations, starting their work. the word go is really, or start now is really often can be a trigger for them. But so they have a hard time and need a lot of help when it comes to initiating. When I do trainings, I pack it with lots of resources. If you need more resources on anything, you're always welcome to reach out to me or FAU CARD in general. We have clinicians that serve Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie, Indian River, and Okeechobee counties. And Sarah Ward is definitely the guru of executive functioning. She's got an amazing website, Cognitive Connections, with lots of great resources. I'm sure a lot of your patients have executive functioning. My husband can never find his keys and wallet. You don't have to be autistic to have executive functioning issues. I would definitely, she's a wonderful, wonderful resource. He hates it when I make that joke, just for fun. Theory of mind and perspective taking. This is where the bottom falls out for children and adults who have autism. This is uniquely autistic. Theory of mind and perspective taking is my ability to know that you have different thoughts and feelings than I do, and if I change my behavior, I can change your thoughts and feelings about me. People I want you to have good thoughts about me. I know that if you like me, you will learn more from me, and it is my job to teach. So it's really important that I come in here today looking like I know what I'm going to talk about, because I want you to have a good idea in your head. If I came in looking like I just came from the beach, you would have a thought about me. And I would have to work really, really hard to get you to change that thought about me. Think about how complex that is. So, are y'all familiar with the Sally Ann test? Okay, this is a quick, dirty, kind of ancient, I remember this test in grad school, that it's certainly, I wouldn't even use it as a screener, but it really, really shows you, demonstrates nicely what perspective taking is. Can you hit the thing? Oh, that was a video. Sorry. It takes a second.
The classic test for mind reading is called the Sally Ann. It's a test that normal kids are expected to pass when they're 5 years old.
Who'd like to go next? Right, okay, this is Sally, and this is Anne. Which one's Sally?
This one.
Well done, right. And Sally has got a basket. And Anne has got a box, nothing in it. And Sally has got a marble. And Sally puts her marble into her basket to keep it safe while she goes outside to play. But while Sally's outside, naughty Anne moves the marble from Sally's basket into her box. Naughty Anne. So where's the marble now?
Box.
Good. Where did Sally put the marble in the beginning?
Basket.
In the basket. Well done. So when Sally comes back from playtime, where will she look for her marble?
In the box.
In the box.
Robert should have said the basket, because that is where Sally, in her ignorance, would have thought it was. He hasn't mind-read the situation from her point of view. What is it about the autistic brain, which means that children like Robert may never be able to mind-read like the rest of us?
So, perspective taking and deficits in theory of mind have nothing to do with IQ. So we have some really, really brilliant children out there that are off the charts when it comes to IQ, but can't make and maintain friends because they can't pick up some of those nonverbal cues. So it affects all of those interactions. So they can be very, very lonely and very isolated, even though they're can be very, very smart, or certainly very capable of living independently and doing independent things. So think about how this perspective taking really, especially starting in the 3rd grade, where we read to learn, can be a real problem. When you get into novels with multiple characters, if you have 2 characters that know something and you're the reader, so now you know it, and then this third person comes in and isn't supposed to know it, it'd be really hard to figure out how that dynamic is between all the characters in a book. It can be very, very challenging for them. Same with social-based themes, kids making jokes, different kinds of puns. Things are really lost. They are very concrete learners, and oftentimes have to be explicitly taught some of the social cues. So all of these things, central coherence, executive functioning, and theory of mind, are all on their own continuum. Just like autism is a continuum, some of our kids can have really good executive functioning, go to college, do great, good theory of mind, but have absolutely no friends and miss every kind of social cue. You know, when we talk about nonverbal communication, being 90% of communication. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about theory of mind. My ability to get into conversations, get out of conversations. My ability to know whether I should mention a topic or not to someone I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to talk politics with anybody I don't know. That could really blow up badly. But if I don't have good theory of mind, I may not be picking up your signals that I'm not on the same team as you, and leave bad thoughts in someone's head consequently. So all of these things are synergistic. They all do work together, but what's important for you to know is that they are all on their own continuum. Now, one of the handout that I sent is the I-Laugh model. Oh, autism doesn't go away. We do lots of strategies, lots of interventions that are strategically based, and we can really build capacity well with many of our children, that they can really make friends, get along with others, maintain a job, those kind of things. It does take strategies, but it doesn't go away. They're going to be quirky, for sure. The I-Laugh model was developed by Michelle Garcia Winner, socialthinking.com, and it breaks down some of these skills from these 3 neurologic processes. It, in my opinion, is a really great quick and dirty checklist. You know, if you're a parent or a therapist and you're trying to figure out where is this kid's deficit in a quick and dirty way, there are more formal ways to do it for sure. The I-Laugh model, I think, gives you that and gives you some nice strategies as well. So the first one is initiation. I talked about this a bit, just saying that they have a really hard time asking for questions. If they have a question in class, so a lot of times they don't have really great affects, so the teacher may not be picking up that I'm missing him. You know, he doesn't know what I'm trying to teach here. So coming up with ways for children to initiate and keep engaged is huge. What I recommend to teachers is they teach a really clear response. When I do this, this is what you do. It's explicit kind of teaching. Reinforce success by showing different ways to gain information. So helping them kind of understand, okay, you're not going to raise your hand, but maybe you're going to put something on your desk, or you're going to raise a finger, or something like that to cue the teacher, and this is what I want to do. Set up routines so that after lunch, the child has to go over to the teacher and say, Miss Smith, how was your lunch? What did you have for lunch? Whatever, to just get them in those kind of routines. I'm going to talk more about that. This is a great tool. It's quick and easy. I give these cards out because a lot of times our kids get stuck, not because they don't know what kind of help they need. And what's the first thing a teacher says? What do you need? What's going on? And they're like, I don't know. This little visual is really helpful because they can narrow in and start the conversation. And all they have to do is pull it right out of their desk and put it on top of their desk to cue the teacher. So one evidence-based practice that is very effective in in really any skills that you're teaching, you have to decide, is a social story. Social stories are quick, easy, they're visually based because we know that our children with autism are visual learners. They process information much more effectively if it is presented visually. This is huge. When I work with teachers and their style is all lecture, It's no wonder that the child is lost, because that is not how they're processing information. But here's an interesting fun fact. Our kids on the spectrum don't think in pictures. So, for instance, if you are leaving here and you are going to go to the grocery store to pick up a carton of eggs, when you cross the threshold of the grocery store, you're picturing in your head where the eggs are, what it looks like, the aisle it's on, maybe some things around the aisle. Thinking in pictures helps us maneuver the world. It helps give us a frame of reference and background information so that we know what to expect and things aren't so dramatic. Children on the spectrum have a very difficult time thinking in pictures. So giving them pictures to help them understand information is one of the best evidence-based practices that you can implement. So this is a social story, a demonstration of a social story on how to say hello. It's easy to read. There's always pictures. Gives a kid a way out there of something that may happen. And you always relate it back to how you make someone else feel. So, and what it could lead into. So it's really preparing the child. What I like about social stories, again, it's an evidence-based practice. It's something they can hold in their hand. It's something they can reference a lot. I have referenced Affirm here. If you Google Affirm Autism, Affirm has many evidence-based practice tutorials for children on the autism spectrum. So they will walk you through how to do a social story, how to do video modeling, discrete trial. I mean, you're not going to become an expert, but it's going to give you a really nice taste, and you can incorporate it in your interventions. So the second one is listening with your eyes and brain. We know that our children have weak auditory processing skills. They have real barriers to prediction. One of my resources at the end of this presentation is Context Blindness by Vermeulen. And he actually was one of our keynotes at the CARD conference last January, state CARD conference. And his number one thing that he talked about was this unpredictability. This is what really rocks their world. When they don't see something coming, their anxiety goes through the roof. So preparing children and priming them for whatever is going to happen can make all the difference in the world. It's the difference between a smooth transition or a fun new experience or total meltdown and everything falling apart. Poor sustained eye contact, challenging to work in groups. These are all listening with your eyes kind of things. So I was teaching in Martin County schools, and I had 2 classrooms of high-functioning children with autism. I had been through 3 curriculums for social skills probably by October. It was not going well. I just thought, I'm turning them into these little weird robots, you know, hello, it's nice to see you kind of thing. Kids don't say hi like that. So I went to my first social thinking conference and had my total aha moment. It was amazing. And so I came back to the classroom and I said to the teacher, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I had these lovely blocks that are just so fun to play with, and I put them all around the front of the classroom. And I said, okay, you guys, there was only about 7 kids in the first class I went into. I said, we're going to play a game. I'm going to look at you. I'm going to look at a block, and I want you to get the block that I'm looking at. Looked up. All the kids are like, no clue what you want, lady. Like, no clue. I said, okay, too tough. Gathered up my blocks. We went to the back of the room. We sat on the floor in a nice little semicircle, and I looked at a little girl, looked at a block, and with great confidence, she got up, picked up the block over here. Looked at a little boy, looked at a block, great confidence, he got up, picked up the block in front of me. I looked up at the teacher and she did this. I was like, I got it. I know where we need to start with these kids now. They got bad theory of mind. They're not following. They're not thinking with their eyes, which is what we do. You all thought with your eyes from the moment you got up this morning, whether it was positioning yourself in the kitchen so that you're out of your significant other's way, maneuvering yourself in the parking lot, figuring out where you're going to sit in here and who you're going to sit next to. You were thinking with your eyes constantly. Your eyes are giving you so much information. That's nonverbal communication. That's what they mean by it. You're picking up cues and you're figuring it out. So I created a lesson. And we started with, and this is all based on socialthinking.com. I did not create it. I just broke it down so that I could teach it. We talked about the parts of the eye first. I taught the kids, see your pupil, that iris right in the middle, or the pupil right in the middle? Your eyes are like arrows. If I'm looking at something, I'm probably thinking about it. Now, nobody had to teach us that. 10-month-olds know that. Okay? But we have to teach our kids. If I'm looking at something, I'm probably thinking about it. So we start with the parts of the eye. Then I drew eyes on my Promethean board, which I loved. And I would have the kids take turns to come up and draw arrows. Your eyes are like arrows. What direction are these eyes looking in? Everybody had a chance. We practiced it an awful lot. Then we did it with pictures. This was probably 3 sessions. All right. So then I had them try it. They each got 3 blocks. They sat across from each other, and they would take turns looking at a block, and the other child would have to identify, what block are you looking at? Because your eyes are like arrows. And we played things like, I'm looking at the clock. What do you think I'm thinking of? Oh, you're looking at the clock. What do you think I'm thinking of? You're thinking about the time. Why would I be thinking about the time right about now? Check your schedules. Oh, it's almost lunchtime. Yep, that's why I'm looking at the clock, because I'm thinking about lunch. I'm thinking about what time are we going to break for lunch. So that is where we started. And I will tell you that my students had this in less than 3 weeks. They understood the power of the eye and how they could start now getting some clue about what the other person is thinking because of what they're looking at. So I talked about using visuals is really important. This is, even if you're not the greatest, if you're trying to demonstrate something with any of your students or any of your clients, it's okay to just do big bubbles and put words in it. It doesn't have to be pretty. If you can anchor them with something visually, then it really helps them process the information that you're trying to help them with. Breaking it down into smaller parts is super important. I do a whole social skills training on the 4 steps of communication so that we really, really drill down into, one component in the step of communication is turn your shoulders and hips towards the person you're talking to. That's easy to teach with kids, but it has so much impact. It's so huge, that one little thing. Abstract and inferential. They have a really difficult time thinking about and learning about things that aren't right in front of them. So this whole project-based learning is perfect for a child with autism. They have their hands on, they're engaged, they're thinking. It's great for every child, but because of the difficulty they have with the strength that they have in processing visually, it's a much better way for them to learn things. They can be very concrete. They hate to guess. They hate inferencing. It's just too much of a big unknown. They don't know what to pull from, and it usually creates a lot of anxiety. That's another reason why they like the sameness. Idioms and metaphors are often lost on them. Difficulty with nonverbal communication, I've talked about that, and certainly reading and comprehension challenges. So some of the strategies you can use is to really clarify expectations. Make lots of lists, too. If you want them to do something and they're readers, then you are going to want to list the steps. Talk about each. Have them problem solve it out. Again, strong cognitive behavioral kind of therapy is ideal. Target the student's ability to interpret intentional and unintentional communication. We unintentionally communicate a majority of the time. looking at what I moved on to was different play scenarios and tried to get the children to figure out, based on what the children were doing, based on their position, based on what they're looking at, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? And so we would move through this. These are some of our primary visual tools that we use often. I did a training for the Hope Center in Martin County, and I created this Get Ready for School thing, and then on the back of it was an invitation to parents, you know, for me to do a workshop on visuals at home for parents. So at the training, I said to the parents, you know, how'd y'all like, you know, my invitation thing? And my moms were like, oh my God, mornings have never been this easy before. It's very reinforcing for my kid to check off the box with, you know, a dry erase marker and move on to the next one. I'm doing a lot less prompting, so he doesn't have to figure it out. He just has to check his schedule. Mom's not saying, brush your teeth, brush your hair, get dressed. She's saying, check your schedule, see where you are. It really creates independence. It's a strategy we use in classrooms all the time. These prompt-dependent kids, we got to move them off that really, really quickly and fade that. First then helps them self-regulate so that they know what the expectation is. And four-square breathing, this is a lovely visual, you know, deep breathe 3 times. It changes you neurologically. So when if you can teach them this just like we teach 911, when they are in a hyper state or an anxious state, then they will automatically can go to their four-square breathing and start bringing themselves down. Understanding perspective, this is theory of mind, is the U. If we aren't communicating, if we don't have a good plan and we don't stick to our plan, then we're going to miss the message. We're going to miss the mark. So lots of work on perspective taking and helping them understand how their behaviors affect other people, good and bad. It's always amazing to me how oblivious the kids can be when they blow up, and it's really would be so embarrassing for other kids, but they just kind of let it roll off their shoulders because they're not picking up the other cues that kids are giving them. So they really have to be shown that. So perspective taking considers your thoughts and emotions, the other person's thought and emotions, physical and language-based motives and intentions, very important. Again, most of these things pull from our prior knowledge. We're constantly building on the information. Belief system is a big one, and certainly personality. Strategies. Stress thinking about others' thoughts and feelings. Use graphic organizers. These are huge. If you can draw things out and just give them an idea of what you're trying to say visually, you will be much more successful in therapy. Problem solving. I feel like we don't do that in general for our kids as much, not just kids with autism. You know, I as a parent, one of my rules was always, I'm not going to answer a question with anything but a question. You know, well, what do you think we should do? You know, or why is that a problem? So, I mean, those are good skills that we teach our kids all the time, and we have to explicitly teach it to our children with autism. And of course, teaching thinking with your eyes. It makes a huge difference. But once they've learned how to think with their eyes, now we have to teach them how to act, right? How to respond and be part of what's going on. Video modeling is another evidence-based intervention. It's so cool and relatively easy to do. Honestly, if you Googled video modeling for whatever behavior you wanted, you could probably find a video model for it. What I love about video modeling, aside from some of the social skills stuff, but also some of our kids have a really hard time like tying their shoes. And this isn't just kids with autism. Video modeling that stuff really allows them to watch a video, stop it, practice it, watch it again, start it, continue it. So it's a nice way for them to do something independently. And I think I have one.
Time for school. The video Time for School covers basic social skills needed to get along at school. Things like how to listen to the teacher, sit quietly, ask a friend to play on the playground, and more. Watch this.
Hello, Casey.
Hi, Talia.
I turned my shoulders to my friend to say hello. See how we look at each other with our eyes?
I went to the park this weekend and we had a really big picnic.
Say hello. Turn your body. Look. Say hello.
Very simple, very explicit, but this is how we teach kids with autism these kind of skills. And I don't teach them to do
Time for
things
school.
that aren't typical. Like most kids go, hey. You know, they don't say, hello, how was your weekend? You know, that doesn't really happen very often. Gestalt processing is really that big picture stuff. It has a lot to do with the central coherence and taking it all in, picking up on those contextual cues. Oftentimes, you know, especially teachers, being able to give them the visuals along with the verbal so that they can really follow along with what they're trying to do and trying to teach. Writing can be very tangential. For instance, oftentimes I'll see, you know, the teacher says, okay, you guys are going to, whatever the subject is, write me 3 paragraphs on the Civil War. So the first paragraph may have something about the Civil War in it. The second paragraph is totally off topic, like has gone way out about something that happened to occur in their brain, so they wrote it down. And a lot of times the final paragraph will have some kind of loop around mention of the topic. So helping them using graphic organizers and things like that to stay on task and understand those components of written language are super helpful. They often have difficult time working in groups. And you know, the natural progression in education is if I'm working one-on-one with you, so your IEP says I'm going to work one-on-one, and you get really good at that, then the teacher thinks, they're ready for small group instruction. And you move them into small group, and without proper supports, they fail miserably because they can't keep up with the conversation, they can't keep up with the topic. They need a lot of prompting and intervention to help them understand what they should be doing when it comes to a small group. Especially if the group is with the kids, you know, how they have just children in groups. Oftentimes they're either very lost or they take over. They can be very bossy because it's their only way to control the situation. So we also see kind of both ends of that spectrum there. This is a wonderful resource for writing strategies, and graphic organizers is the self-regulated writing strategies. But super really easy to do. Anybody could do it. Humor and human relatedness. Our kids have great senses of humor. They really do. They can be quirky senses of humor, but still they can be very, very hysterical. The problem is sometimes they don't know if they're being laughed at or laughed with. So a lot of times we see children that act out. They're the class clown. They get a lot of attention, but by the time middle school comes around, that same child is being bullied badly because they're just don't fit in. So helping them understand when humor is appropriate and when it is not. One of my students, when I was in Martin County, she was a blurter. She blurted all the time. And whatever I was teaching, she would call out. She was very smart too. She'd call out the answer and, you know, make me nuts. And I had done this big data collection. I did this big intervention on getting her to stop blurting. Then I went to social thinking conference and learned that she's not following my eyes. So when I'm looking and asking questions, she thinks I'm looking at her. So I would have to give her the hand as my visual. Now, this would be very rude to do to any of you all, but I taught her, if I'm not looking at you, I'm not talking to you. And when she would start to blurt, I would put my hand up and say, I'm looking at Johnny right now. Johnny is who I'm talking to. And boy, it shut her down. Her blurting numbers dramatically dropped because now I was giving her a really solid cue of why I wasn't talking to her, and she was starting to cue into, oh, well, that's true. She's not looking at me. Her head is turned, you know, and she was able to develop the skill or drop the blurting pretty quickly. Teach humor has a time and place. Evidence-based social skills programs are great for this kind of thing. You create a safe place. We would love to see more providers doing social skills in the community. FAU card can help you with that. I have a number of resources in here as well. But if you really want to impact high-functioning kids with autism, social skills training is so important, because it really does teach them how they're supposed to act. And social skills is not a part of a standardized curriculum, so it's not something typically that educators address. I talked about teased and bullying. There are secondary mental health things that we are seeing off the charts. FAU card has an annual mental health conference as well. It's either in March or May. I don't remember. We haven't planned it yet, but it'll be our third year doing this. We bring in experts to talk about autism, and in the past we've done a lot of cognitive behavioral stuff, because that would be our #1 intervention. Oh, and the other thing, targeting bullying. Bullying takes place in these downtimes, not during instruction times. Waiting in line, out on recess, lunch, those kind of things. Teachers really need to be hyper-vigilant during those times, because it honestly is causing so much mental illness with our children on the spectrum. We see it as they get older. It's just really awful. This is Michelle Garcia-Winder, the founder of socialthinking.com. She is a speech-language pathologist. She lives out in California. She's worked with a lot of the high-tech guys that are on the spectrum and nobody knows it, and they can't figure out why their wives are mad at them, kind of thing. So she walks them through that process and helps them do that. Her thing is, think of social skills in a broader sense. That it's not just getting along with others. It's how do we get in conversations? How do we get out? How do we share space with people? So if I'm sharing an office, I once had a person like this, and she talked to herself, you know, and I'm a really tolerant person. I don't have a whole lot of sensory things that make me crazy. But, you know, after like 4 months of me going, are you talking to me? And you know, I was like, I don't know what to do. She can't share space with me. It's making me crazy. I don't know if it's me or her. So it really, we're looking at things like that. How do kids get along if they're just sitting next to each other too? So these are some of my best resources. These are social thinking resources. Thinking About You, Thinking About Me is the social thinking Bible. I mean, it takes you through their entire methodology. If you have or love a child with autism, I always recommend this book to families. There are many aha moments in it. That's my kid kind of thing. She has tons of free articles and resources on her website as well at socialthinking.com. This is the one in the middle is a early intervention curriculum that Social Thinking has created for preschool to about 2nd grade. It teaches those foundation skills like are you in the group, thinking with your eyes, having a group plan. They're comic books, basically. So you are a social detective. As our kids gain in language, I love this book because in one fell swoop, I can teach a teacher the language and a kid the language all at the same time. Behaviors are either expected or unexpected. They're not appropriate or inappropriate, bad or good. It all depends on context. If we teach a child no yelling, and then they go to a football game and everybody's yelling, this is going to whack them out. They're going to be like, you're not supposed to be yelling. And so language and interaction, social skills is contextually based, and that's what we teach, because then we're giving them strategies based on the environment. And a lot of those strategies are look around you, see what other people are doing. It's a clue to what you should be doing. That's huge. Think about how big that is. We do it every day. We don't think about it. What am I supposed to be doing? What page are you on? We do it all the time without thinking about it. They also have for elementary and middle school, they have a Superflex. He is a superhero that teaches flexible thinking. What I loved about implementing this social skills program when I found it was it's not the child, it's these awful invaders of their brain. So it's not that the child is resistant to getting off the computer and transitioning to writing. It's rock brain has invaded your brain. So here are some strategies that you can use to defeat rock brain. And so they're more motivated to do it. I started my social skills lessons with, I made them like a placemat, and we went through each of these unthinkables. And I had the kids, well, this is what rock brain does. He tells you to stay and do something that someone wants you to move to something else. He gets you stuck on certain things. If you have rock brain in your brain, go ahead and circle rock brain on your paper. This laid out my treatment plan. It helped me identify and individualize the intervention that I was providing for each of my students. Social thinking also has a curriculum full of lots of activities to develop theory of mind perspective taking, as well as executive functioning and central coherence. She's very big in all of that stuff. These are more social skills curriculums, both evidence-based as well. Children's friendship training is for elementary school. Peers is for high school. They also have a peers for adult. These curriculums explicitly teach. It's different than social thinking. So let me give you an example. Both of them have chapters on teasing comebacks because we're trying to arm our children against teasing. And so what they do is they have about a list of 25 comebacks. And you're supposed to pick 3 and memorize them. So it's something like, yeah, whatever, if you say so, okay, right? That's all I have to memorize. So when that bully or someone is teasing you and makes fun of your shoes, you say, whatever. By the 3rd time, the bully's gone, completely diffused. That's not what bullies are looking for. They're looking for, I'm going to talk about this kid's shoes, and he's going to flip that desk because he's so agitated. But when we give them a tool to use against this kind of stuff, it normalizes it. That is explicitly teaching the skills. Both of these things, both of these curriculums, they're basically the same curriculum, they're just leveled for age, are very, very effective and easy to implement. They are very prescriptive. So anybody in this room could actually implement it. It would be a huge service to our community. So let's talk about anxiety. I'm a speech-language pathologist, and I'm not a mental health person, and the deeper I get into FAU card, the more I'm learning about mental health and the things that our children go through. So we know that anxiety can be very debilitating, and what I find that's different with our kids with autism is either they act out or they do nothing. They have no affect, they have no response to things, it's all internal, but the anxiety is through the roof. You know, everybody walks around, anxiety is not a bad thing. You know, if this place was on fire, our anxiety would get us out of here. So our anxiety is always around here as we walk through life. But for kids on the spectrum, it's higher. And it doesn't take much to flip them over the edge. So giving them strategies to help them reduce their anxiety, to identify their anxiety, and then reduce it is part of our strategies. So anxiety affects 1 in 4 students between 13 and 18 years of age. That's all students, not just kids with autism. It's often misdiagnosed as ADHD. If you think about ADHD and a lot of those characteristics, they're very similar to children with high-functioning autism. So it's easy to misdiagnose and medicate, and it's not always the best thing if they have autism, for sure, and not ADHD. 80% of our individuals with autism do have anxiety. That's a very high number. 50% of our children on the spectrum also have co-occurring depression. Incentives and consequences don't work with 50% of your children. This is very frustrating to educators. I don't know how you all feel about this, but for instance, if you were to tell me, I am going to fly to Italy tomorrow, and if you could get me out of here a half an hour early, I'll give you $100 because I still got to pack, I got stuff to do. I could say, all right, I'll talk quick. I could do that for $100. That's not a problem. But then if you said to me, you know what would really be helpful? Could you say the rest of your lecture in Italian? Well, that, and I'll give you $1,000. That's beyond my capability. So when we are shooting too high with our kids on our goals, we get breakdown. They crash. And so that should be your signal to cut whatever that objective is at least in half. It's okay to take baby steps and move through them quickly. But when we have responses from children that are explosive or unpredictable because we've asked them to do something, it's because they can't do it. When anxious, somebody loses, anybody loses 13 to 18 IQ points. Don't know about you, but I can't afford 13 or 18 IQ point loss at this point. So think about these skills as not that they can't do it, but that they are underdeveloped skills. I just feel like if we frame it as an underdeveloped skill, it's easier to target and remediate because then we have a process. Strategies for working with anxiety and working memory. Cognitive distractions. Oftentimes what I see in classrooms is kids get their break card and they, if you're feeling overwhelmed, here's your break card, go on and, chill out in the beanbag in the back of the room. Well, here's the thing. If a child has anxiety and negative talk and they love to color and the teacher thinks, oh, they're having a break, it's great, they can be back there coloring and thinking, she hates me, I'm stupid, I'm never going to get this right. And then they can come back either without any change or worse. Their behavior could be worse. So that should be a gauge to, are these breaks working? So one of the strategies for that is to develop cognitive distractions. These are things that the student can do independently that require a cognitive engagement. So Sudoku, word puzzles, things that you have to think about really does give you that cognitive break that you may need to reduce your anxiety, and then they would come back to the group in a better place. Wonderful tip that I learned from Jessica Minahan. Let's see, make problems smaller, do a lot of chunking, reward persistence instead of product, because that's often what our children are missing. They're missing the keep at it until you get it done. And it's your jobs to make it easy for them to achieve initially so we can build some momentum. Smooth transitions. A lot of times our children have that rock brain and they have a difficult time moving on. Never make them too abrupt. So things like visual timers in the background is really nice, so you're not cluttering the air with a lot of verbiage, but they have a frame of reference to check in to see how much longer they have on something. Countdowns can usually create, as you can imagine, anxiety. Saying pause instead of stop. Sometimes stop is a trigger, especially if they're transition. They have difficulty transition. Using transition sponges. So things like, okay, everybody up, and Johnny, why don't you push everybody's chair in? So you're distracting them and you're keeping them moving. Momentum activity. I did this week, and the teacher thought I was brilliant. She had this child who was sleeping in the timeout thing, and beanbag, and I said, no sleeping in school. What are we doing here? She's like, well, I'm going to wake him up and he's going to explode because he doesn't like to move. And I said, you know what, give him a piece of paper and say, hey, you know what, can you help me out? Can you go throw this piece of paper out for me? And then at that point tell him, okay, go ahead and line up for lunch. And so he did, and he did it just straight right away. And she was like, I'm like, children want purpose. They want to be helpful. It's innate in us to be helpful. And so it worked with him like a charm. Let's hope it keeps working like a charm. But look at those momentum things, especially at home. This can be very helpful. These are kind of my go-to resources from social thinking. Social behavioral mapping and think sheets are really based on cognitive behavioral intervention, but it gives you some really, really nice structure to your sessions. Zones of regulation are visual. It's a visual. It teaches children to identify when they're starting to get anxious and provides them with strategies and gives them visuals so they can identify, I'm at this level, here's the strategy I need to do, and then they can reduce it. Jessica Minahan is the greatest behavior analyst I have ever heard speak. She is from Boston. She still works in the schools with the most difficult kids. She's written 2 books just full of practical behavioral strategies. I only have a couple minutes left, so I just want to mention that it's kind of my personal thing that I'm taking on for the last couple of years. 90% of children with disabilities are sexually abused at least once before their 18th birthday. This is horrifying to me because I have been working with special needs children my entire professional life, and the thought that I haven't done something sooner about it keeps me up at night. Safer, Smarter Kids is a free Sunshine State standard curriculum. It's about 6 sessions, generally 30-minute sessions, free to all teachers in Florida. They have a curriculum for kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, and they have a special needs curriculum as well that's full of visuals that helps them. Basically, it teaches who are your safe people, and if you're uncomfortable, tell somebody. It's not graphic in any way or anything like that. It's very developmentally appropriate. So when I get in front of y'all, I always push that too. So these are books that I highly recommend, especially for when you're working with high-functioning people on the spectrum. They're extremely helpful. I've already talked about contextual blindness. Uniquely Human is amazing. We've had Barry Prezant come and talk. FAU card, we do tons of trainings every year. We bring in national presenters from all over the place. If you want to get on our mailing list, please let me know. You can email me, and I'll put you on our mailing list. I can share any resources with you that you need. We do have a mental health conference every year. We'd love to see you all there, and we want feedback on the kind of things you want to learn about when it comes to mental health and people on the spectrum. All right, I guess I'm done. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Rosie. And as I mentioned before, in March,